Okay, let's talk about something really simple that other people have complicated the piss out of. I have seen people try to explain this so many different ways, and it's like writing a manual on how to unscrew a jar of peanut butter. Let's say, I've been out shooting most of the day, sorry, I'm really tired. You're shooting a scene and the sun is just blasting down, or you don't have control of the ambient light as far as the background and whatnot, but that's how you want to frame it. Do you think the answer is sticking on a neutral density filter? Why, sure it is. Well, what's that going to do to your subject? You drop down your background, you could be dropping down your subject too. That is a valid option if you actually plan on raising up the illumination on your subject. But what is the really simple answer? There's more than one way to skin a cat, but really in this situation, there are not many ways to skin a cat. It's a southern expression. It means there's more than one way to do something. So you can pop on an ND filter, pain in the crotch. That causes also other issues. You have to drop your shutter speed. You might end up with shake, and then you got autofocus issues. So screw that. There are plenty of situations where it calls for an ND filter. Think of it very simply. That's outside of the dynamic range of what your camera is capable of. You want to capture the shadow details, but they are hardcore in the shadow. And your ambient light is just peaking 2-3 stops above the dynamic range of what your camera is. And it doesn't matter what you do. You didn't bring a handheld reflector. This is the reason why every time I go somewhere, this is in my bag. A wireless trigger set, one obviously transmitter for my camera, and a receiver for my speed light. Right, y'all. Very, very simple. I'm in auto mode right now, which means automatically turns off, set ISO. He has an Nikon speed light I'm using with the Fuji. Works the same way with an Nikon as a Canon as a Fuji. No different. I'm going to meter from my background, and I'm going to expose it however I want. You can either set the exposure for what you want your background to be or to drop it, and then I raise the illumination up for my subject. It is no different than saying that you have two things you're exposing for in your scene because the dynamic range is just too damn far out for your camera to cover it. Yes, you could actually expose for the highlights or expose for the background and then do selective editing as far as tweaking the raising your slider bars in Lightroom or doing selective exposure on your shadows versus your highlights. Yes, of course you can do that. That's also time consuming and a pain in the butt. If you have a decent distance, meaning like 20 yards or less between your subject and yourself, Speedlight can cover it. All you have to do is choose whatever compositionally you want for your background, okay, and then raise your subject up to match whatever it is you want at whatever lighting angle it is you want. Now, if it's outside of arm's length reach, then you're going to have to mount it on a tripod, aren't you? You're going to have to mount it on a little Joby tripod. You're going to have to mount it on something. Okay, I got too much dynamic range out. Okay, I'm going to expose for my background. I'm actually going to raise my subject illumination. Oh, and the shot came out perfectly. Only thing that you're doing is that you're narrowing the distance between your specular highlights and the shadow detail that you want to preserve such that they fall within the dynamic range of your camera. There are a lot of shots like this, and they're really challenging. I just couldn't get it. It was just, the shadows were just like way dark, and I hear this all the time from people. And people try to explain this in photography courses, and they just drone on and on like I'm kind of doing right now, but I'm making it simple at the very least. About trying to explain how to do this is really simple. Expose and raise. If you can't remember anything else, just remember expose and raise. E and R, like emergency room. And this is exactly what it is. It's an emergency because you're like, oh shit, I want to take this picture, but my highlights are just, wow, they're way out there, and the shadows are like, woo, and my camera ain't going to do it. So what are you going to do? You got to bring the light. Got to bring the light. Okay? Expose and raise. What does that mean? It means you're exposing for your ambient or your background. You can make it whatever the hell you want. You can take bright sunlight and make it look like dusk if you want. Okay, I'm just going to crank it past. You're going to need to be at your sync speed, of course. So 250 a second. But what if I want to do it at f2.8? This is where you're going to have high-speed sync options, obviously. So this is where high-speed sync comes into play. Let's say I want to drop it a couple stops so it's just not blinding bright, I expose for my ambient, my background, whatever that may be, and then I raise my subject with my speed light to whatever value it is that I choose. You know, there's this little dial on the back that lets you choose the power. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's not bright enough compared to the background, or it's too bright. You know, there's a little plus button and a minus button. It's not that difficult. Expose, E and R, emergency room. Expose for the background or your ambient, meaning your highlights is what we're referring to here, and then raise your subject. It does not matter, because you got a power dial on the back of the speed light here. It does not matter what the hell it is you expose for your background, as long as it's within your sync speed range, of course. You can make your background look however you want. If you want to take a test shot, that's fine. Who cares if the subject is black? Okay? Just expose for the background. It's like, this is exactly how I want the background to look. Okay? That's step one. Now you're going to layer the light by adding the illumination to your subject at whatever value, whatever point of illumination you want. Like it's up here, here, down here, over here, on a tripod, a reflector. Whatever it is that you want. E and R, emergency room. Expose to the background, raise for your subject. Ah, it turned out beautifully. What I've done is I've taken this kind of dynamic range that exists, and I've done this to it, so my camera can handle it. There are a lot of shooting scenarios like that out there, especially in bright daylight. Or even in the dusk, like you got a backlit subject. You know, what are you going to do? You can't, even though like the sun is like 3/4 over the horizon, for example, you got someone on the beach. It's like you want that shot, the sunset behind them coming over the shoulder. I want, that's the composition I want. But I can't, I can expose for one, but I can't expose for the other. This is what you do. You expose for your background, the sun, the water, as an example. You expose for that, you raise for your subject. It's very, very simple. People complicate the piss out of this stuff when I see other people trying to teach it to people. I mean, they'll just complicate the hell out of it. Just E and R, emergency room. I can't take this shot. There's too much difference between my shadows and my specular. My background is like, wow, and my shadows are way down here in the dark. People are like, my camera can't handle it. You're right. That is outside the dynamic range of your camera's capabilities. That is why you have a speed light. This is why it's always in your bag. This should always be in your bag. It's always in my bag when I go anywhere. It's like I'm going to go out shooting, and there's plenty of sun out. It's like, well, so what? That is actually big mistake number one that people always make. It's like, I don't need to bring a speed light. I got, the sun's going to be out there. I can stick it up at ISO 100. I still got plenty enough light for everything. You do, but what you don't have is the ability to capture extreme dynamic range between your shadows and your ambient, i.e. your background or your highlights on your object. If you want to sit there and dick around in Lightroom and adjust your slider bars all day long, that's fine too. You know what's a lot easier? Whipping out the speed light, turning on the wireless triggers. Okay, I'm going to expose from my background. Okay, I've done that, and I'm going to take another shot, and oh, great, everything turned out perfectly. Wow. ER, expose, raise. Raise your subject. This is what you're raising your subject with. Expose for your backgrounds. I know I repeated myself a few times in this video, but this is literally as simple as E and R. Expose for the speculars or your background. Okay? And you look at the shot, it's like, well, the background's perfect, but the person that I'm shooting is just totally black. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Usually when you whip out the speed light, you dial it up to wherever the hell you need. Boom, boom, boom. You raise the subject illumination. Whoop. Now instead of your subject being way down here and your highlights being way up here, you've exposed properly for your highlights or your background, and you've raised your subject up, and now, oh my god, look at that! Everything is within the dynamic range of your camera. I don't care what damn camera you got, is within the dynamic range. This is why, boys and girls, this little thing, and a set of wireless triggers, is always in my bag, and it should always be in your bag. That and at least 8 AA batteries to go with it. Professional tip of the day. This is something that is very simple, and yet nobody teaches it. Or they teach it and they make it really complicated, And it shouldn't be complicated. Okay, thank you so much. I always take pizzas as donations because, I'm a fat dude, so you could always send a pizza uh, to my residence. I'm just kidding about that. No, I'm not. Catch you later. Bye-bye. He's crazy.